There was a commentary, and I believe it was Blackaby, but I'll admit I'm not quite sure. But he said this, and this has stayed with me. It's one of those things, whoever said it, it haunts you. And he likened good church people, good folks, who kind of see the be-all, end-all in getting from one good Bible study to the next, or one good church program to the next, and just bing, 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 always doing the programs and the studies and learning, but never using what they learn. See, this isn't to say you shouldn't learn, but to learn, and never use what you learn. He likened these people to those who go from one rich banquet to the next rich banquet, but never push back from the table. Just always consuming, but never exercising. Imagine that in real life, what would happen in physical life. If that was it, if we just did one potluck after another here, just consume. Carol looks tired just thinking of it. But just say we did. And we just get, the richest food, and we went, and every day we came and we ate, and we just never left the table. What would happen? We'd get really fat and real lazy, wouldn't we? And then all kinds of diseases would slip in and all kinds of bad stuff would happen. What makes us think it's any different in the spiritual realm? We eat the best food. We can eat the best food, but in some way we need to work it off. We need to put that fuel to use. Don't stop the studies. We already covered that. You need the nourishment. We all need the nourishment, but at some point we need to push back from the table and go walk it off. We need to go out and exercise those things that we know. I want to throw out two passages to you. One's James chapter 1:22 starting. Prove yourselves to be doers of the word. Starting right there. I could almost stop there. Prove yourselves to be doers of the word. The word needs to be consumed, but that's not the be-all, end-all. It means nothing if it's not done. Prove yourselves to be doers of the word and not only hearers, for those who think that hearing is enough deceive themselves. For if a man is a hearer of the word and not a doer of it, he is like a man who looks in a mirror at his face and sees the nature of himself, and a glance, and then he is gone, and he immediately forgets what kind of man he is. 2 Timothy 3:16. All God-inspired Scripture is useful. Well, I think we figured that one out yet. This is the health food. This is the soul food. But let's continue. Why is it useful? We'll put our system to use here. Why is it useful? All God-inspired Scripture is useful for teaching, for the conviction of error, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be completely, fully equipped for every good work. Now, we looked at the whole analogy of food, the consumption. Now we're talking about the exercise part. What do you do with the fuel now that you have it part. And I can't stand here and tell you in detail, Brenda, if you learn this about Scripture, you're going to go out and do such and I can't give you personal details. But what we can do, what we can know is right here are the universals, is that these are some of the things you can count on that Scripture does, and then your personal details fit in. The first one was, it will teach us. The first thing is to teach us. Interesting word, if we went back in and did a word study and that consuming question, we'd find out it means chastening, education, and nurturing. In other words, Scripture is meant to grow you up. It's meant to grow you up. Just like that food adds an extra 4 inches now to us that from days past. Grow up. There shouldn't be 20-year-old babies in churches. If we've been walking with the Lord for 20 years, we should have 20 years of maturity. It's meant to help us grow up. The second thing was convict us of any error. Convict us of any error. In this, where do errors start? Generally, it's in a preconception. An error is something you usually start off doing something wrong, If you've ever taught yourself a skill and then you went and took formal training on it, whether it's piano or skiing or golf or anything else, chances are you had to unlearn things because you taught yourself the wrong way and then you have to relearn the right way. The Scripture is meant to convict us of errors. The Scripture has a way of straightening you out on things. How many ways can we be wrong or error in how we do things? We can be wrong in our actions, in our attitudes, in our preconceptions, in our impressions, in our feelings, in our values, all of these things. Two things about errors. One is the more profound the error that you're suffering under, the harder it is to change it. The harder it is to change it. However, on the other side, the more profound the error, if you work your way through it with God, the greater the transformation, the greater the reward. Scripture is meant to convict us, can't get away from it, convict us of error. Then the third thing is correct us. Well, isn't that redundant? Aren't we just saying the same thing? Well, think of errors as those things that we just start wrong and we just keep going. Correcting is an interesting word in the original, in the Greek that it was used. It literally meant to straighten up again or to reform. An error may have started right from the beginning, but reformation doesn't start from the beginning. Reformation, or to straighten up, means you knew you started out right, and then somewhere along the way you just started to stray, maybe a lot, maybe a little, and you need to be straightened out. You need to be put back on. You need to reform. You need to change something that you had right before. Maybe it's you just need to be reminded. Maybe it's something that the community itself, the church, God's community needs to tell you. But all the time, we just have this way of straying a little bit. It's like a compass. You're off a degree or two. Maybe it's not even all that bad, but you're off. And you need something to correct you back on course. So Scripture is a compass. It corrects the straying. And then the fourth thing that was down there is training in righteousness. Now, training, we've already covered that when we looked at teaching, training. It all comes down to the same word, even in the Greek. Nothing really earth-shaking. But the interesting word was righteousness. Righteousness. It means equity of character or action. And it means justification, a Christian justification. And here's where we're going to enter, I'm warning you now, dangerous waters with this word. Because when we think of the word justification, it is a core doctrine of the Christian church. You and I are seen innocent by God. We are justified by the blood of Christ. We are seen through His innocence. So that is justification as far as salvation goes. But this word is being used in a little bit of a flip, if you will. Justification is used to describe what Jesus did for you on the cross. But in this sense, we're talking about what you do because of the cross. What you do because of the cross. Keeping it all in balance, we know, we don't want to get this wrong, you cannot work for your salvation. That is way beyond anything you can do. Christ paid the price for us, and we do not have the capital, spiritually speaking, to pay Him back. We will never be able to pay for our salvation. However, what has salvation done? It opens up this other thing called sanctification, or in other words, it opens up for us that now you are in a position where you couldn't approach God, now you can. And it has opened this door where gifts flow from God to you. Gifts as in you have the ability to do things you didn't have before. You have choices. You have capacities that you didn't have before. You are gifted, maybe even in situation. There's these blessings that come down the path. Because although, to put it in biblical terms, although Christ is your substitute sacrifice, your justification, faith without works is what? Dead. So we've got that balance going on. There's still this thing that if you eat, you're supposed to do some work with the food. If you have spiritual nourishment, it's not just to make you feel good, it's not to get you fat, it is to give you something to work with. So we want to make sure we're using this little flip side of the word correctly here. And with that, let me close then with a thought and then a dangerous question. Okay? Doesn't that sound like put you on the edge of your seat? Cliffhanger. Think of this as the thought. We've talked about spiritual nourishment. It is not enough simply to believe. It's not enough to simply just read. It must be consumed. It must be more than just smelling the aroma of it. It must become part of you. Once it has become part of you, it is necessary to remain healthy that you have to involve it in some form of activity. That what you know has to be used. Think of it now in the terms of that justify, and the question dangerously worded is this, is how you live out God's blessings. You're sitting here, and I have no doubt that there is blessing even in the fact that we're all here. Is how you live out God's blessings justify the blessings given to you? Or to put it in a safer way, are you living up to what you know and what you've been given? Are you living up to what you know and what you've been given?